Does badminton need VAR? It's a question that's been asked incessantly over the last few years within the badminton community, and it's a question that has been thrust into the headlines once again following the conclusion of last week's Arctic Open. Well, it's a question alongside many others that I'll be offering my opinion on in this week's episode of Beckman's Breakdown. So, without further ado, let's get right into this week's episode. I'm going to start this week's episode by talking about the conditions inside the arena at the Arctic Open. And the reason I'm doing that is because I feel that it's going to get mentioned a fair bit later on, and rather than just keep repeating myself, I feel if I just lay out what I think about the conditions, what they are, what do they mean, etc., then it's going to give you far more context, and it'll also help me just speed up the process of explanation later on. Now, the short of it was that the playing conditions at the Vantaa Arena were slow. I don't know whether this was to do with just the general conditions of the hall. I don't know whether it's the shuttle speed that was used, or whether it's a combination of all of them. But the crux of it is that the playing conditions were very slow, especially in the earlier rounds when there also didn't seem to be much of a drift. That gets mentioned a lot in the badminton world, and some of you watching might not quite know what it means, so I'm going to explain it in very simple terms. I'm not saying this is the perfect explanation for it, but it's how I interpret the drift, and I think it's the easiest way to explain it. Okay, so drift is basically inside any arena you play at, there's always going to be air currents, whether they're blowing left to right, forward and back, etc. And these can be affected by a number of things, whether there's aircon on, the size of the arena, how many people are in attendance, whether a door is left open, anything that can affect the humidity in the arena, and also just the airflow. The shuttle is incredibly light. It doesn't take much to manipulate its flight path. I mean, if any of you have played outside, badminton isn't an outdoor sport. Just for any of you that don't know badminton, it isn't, but it is a sport that can be enjoyed outside. You know that even if it's slightly windy outside, the shuttle is going all over the place. So even in these arenas that are indoors, there's always going to be some sort of current, some sort of draft, and that's going to affect the flight path quite a lot. Obviously, like I said, there's many factors, so in different arenas around the world, it can vary. Some are very drifty, some are pretty calm, some can also change, which is what I kind of felt happened this week. Went from almost no drift to a little bit of a faster end. But if I'm honest, the drift did play a bit of a role in this tournament, but it was more the slow playing conditions that definitely did. Now, for me, like I said, the drift wasn't too extreme, so it's nothing that and it seemed relatively consistent, even though I said it did change as the week went on. It became a bit more of an issue, but it wasn't that extreme that players at this level can't adapt to it pretty easily. It's pretty standard within the badminton, for the professional players, that they deal with it week in, week out. The one thing that did give me a little bit of worry was the slow playing conditions. Obviously, if it's slower, it's harder to put the shuttle on the floor. It does help defences, and that can sometimes lead to longer matches, more boring matches, if I'm honest. If I use men's doubles, because I feel like that's one discipline that's heavily affected by speed of shuttle, by speed of arena and drift as well, is sometimes when you get men's doubles matches in conditions like this, because it becomes almost impossible to put the shuttle on the floor, you get these rallies that go on plus 20-30 shots, and then it just becomes like a clearing rally. We've seen it countless times before. It does happen in the men's singles as well, but especially in the men's doubles, and it can just kind of like become a little bit monotonous and boring. So I was a little worried once I noticed the conditions like that maybe the men's doubles matches might go that way as well as the other disciplines. But having said that, I actually don't think the conditions were that slow that we got that a lot. We did see some rallies like that this week, but for the most part, these conditions were just on the edge of, for me anyway, making like men's doubles exciting, because you do get into the rallies. I do like seeing attack versus defense. You see the crazy defenses, the long rallies, the all-out attack, but it's not so fast that the rallies just die really quickly, but it's kind of like becomes a little bit more of a battle, which I do quite like watching. So the conditions inside the arena were on the slow side. I do feel for some of the players their shoulders might be hurting a little bit after the end of that week. But it wasn't so slow that the game just divulged into just clearing and stuff. The drift was not too noticeable. But anyway, so when I'm talking, like I said at the start of this little section, the reason I'm bringing this up is because there's going to be, obviously, if I might say, well, this player was affected because of the conditions, I don't need to go into them every single time. So this little section here, this opener, should hopefully give an explanation and some context to what I'll talk about later. The Arctic Open this week saw the return of 4 big names for me. There might have been more, but there were 4 main ones that I noticed that I was quite looking forward to watching play. 2 singles players and a doubles pair. The singles players were both from India, that was Lakshya Sen and PV Sindhu. And in the men's doubles, it was Malaysia's Chia and Soh Wooi Yik, the recent Olympic bronze medalists. How they did, obviously, they didn't do particularly well. Lakshya Sen and Chia and Soh Wooi Yik lost in the second round, and PV Sindhu lost in the first round. Starting with Lakshya Sen, he actually got a walkover, so he lost in his first match, but he played well. He was a little bit unfortunate because he did come up against the eventual winner, Cho Chen of Chinese Taipei, who was having a really, really good week. I'm not just saying that because he won. He looked strong, he looked fit, which is quite incredible considering he's 34 years old. But what he did really well, I will get into him a little bit later, was that he was just a little bit more aggressive and proactive as opposed to what he usually is, especially in his follow-ups from his attack. I saw him finishing the rally from the net far more often than what I usually do. Having said that, for 2 sets, Lakshya Sen was probably the better player. He made the first game closer than it should have been, and he had a good lead in the first half of the second, and then it kind of got away from him. He was playing well. I thought he was playing quickly. He was dealing with the conditions well. It just seemed that maybe he's not fully fit, well, he's definitely not match fit. This is his first tournament since the Olympics. He just ran out of steam. It was, if I'm honest, it was a little similar to his Olympics, because he won the first game, had the advantage in the second, and then let it slip. And he did that in both his semi-final Olympics against Victor and his bronze medal match against Li Zijia. Completely, it's not all the same, but it's just that pattern kind of is how the match panned out. By the third game, he attempted to come back into it, but you could tell that he just wasn't moving as quickly. His legs looked a little heavy, and Cho Chen just got stronger and stronger, which is something that he usually does in those 3-game matches. For PV Sindhu, she was, in all honesty, completely outclassed by Michelle Lee. The scores were a little surprising. Obviously, PV Sindhu is a player that's been a former world champion, Olympic finalist, Asian Games finalist. She is someone that's achieved massive things and always pulls out great performances at the biggest tournaments. For someone of her stature to put in a performance like that was a little bit disappointing. I'm not sure if there's any underlying issues with her. I mean, she looked physically quite strong, didn't look like anything was hampering her. She just made a lot of mistakes, and just Michelle Lee looked, and again, I can't, like I did with Cho against Lakshya, you can't take away from the opponent. Michelle Lee looked really, really good, and she's been struggling with her issues, injury issues consistently over the last few years, so I think maybe she's found a way around that. She was playing fast, she was playing sharp, and fully deserved her victory. I did think, if I'm honest, before this tournament, and once I saw the opening day once I saw some matches where I noticed the conditions were slow, I did think PV Sindhu might have a chance to do quite well, because she usually thrives in the slow conditions. When she won the Worlds in 2019 in Switzerland, the conditions were incredibly slow there. And she's such a physical, tall player that usually she can make these slow conditions play to her, but maybe it's age. She is 29, catching up with her. Maybe she's just not match fit, again, because this was her first tournament back since the Olympics. And also just combine the fact that Michelle Lee was playing really good, very, very sharp, and looked very good. There's going to be a lot of people, and there already have been, saying that maybe it's time for Sindhu to retire. I'm not so sure that's the answer that should be the case. I think she's still hungry to try and figure out what she needs to do. But it's definitely a case of age is catching up. The women's singles discipline is so deep. It's full of so many good younger players, and time doesn't stop for anyone. I do think Sindhu can still, within the performance I saw, there's still glimmers of that she can pull it together. She can still pull out some good kind of performances and some good results at the major tournaments like she's done in the past, but that is a big maybe. So yeah, not the best comeback for her, not the best first tournament back, but I wouldn't say that it's all over for her. In the men's doubles, Aaron Chia and Soh Wooi Yik, I wasn't expecting too much, if I'm honest, for the simple reason that not only was his first tournament back, but the reason for that was that Soh Wooi Yik's been spent, I think, most of that time since the Olympics in a boot due to a metatarsal injury. So I didn't think they were going to come in absolutely flying, and that's kind of true. They played an entertaining match in the first round against a Chinese pair, but they lacked that little zing that they usually have that comes through adequate training and proper match play. And then so they managed to get through against that Chinese pair, probably because they're a little bit inexperienced. And then when they came up against Lane and Vendy, who are a very good pair, they can have when they're at their highest point, they are capable of beating anyone in the world. So when Aaron Chia and Soh Wooi Yik came up against them, I would say probably lack of training and match fitness definitely showed. It seemed to be the rallies were good, they were long and hard, but a bit of impatience from the Malaysians, especially from Soh Wooi Yik missing a few crucial shots. And all credit to the English, they played with good variety, which was absolutely crucial in the slower conditions. You can't just smash, you've got to play all the little drops and the slices and the variety, and they did that very well and were deserved winners. I think with just a little bit more time, we'll see Aaron Chia and Soh Wooi Yik back where they belong. This is only a small blip, and I think they just need a little more time. I just hope that foot injury is fully healed. So the Arctic Open didn't just see some pairs returning to action, there was also the debut of some new pairings. The first one is probably one of the most unique pairings, is because the reason it's Alexandra Boje and Robin Tabeling. And the reason that's unique is because if you know where both those players come from, they come from different countries. So they're a mixed nation pairing. The reason they've come about is, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe Robin's former partner Selena Peake has retired or is taking a break. I'm pretty sure she's retired, but don't quote me on that. And Alexandra Boje's partner, Matthias Christiansen, had that whole... Well, he missed 3 drug tests, so he's currently on a 1-year ban. That's the reason why they were withdrawn from the Olympics. Obviously, because of that, they've been... obviously thought maybe they should go put together. I'm not sure whether that was a joint decision from the players individually or the coaches. But it's an interesting partnership because both of them are very good. They were both very successful with their previous partnerships. I think they would link together quite well. I think Robin and Christiansen's styles aren't too dissimilar. And yeah, just really interesting and unique. It isn't, for some of you, I know I did a post about them on Instagram, and there were a number of people saying that, has this ever happened before, and is it allowed, what are the rules around it? And yeah, well, of course it can happen, as long as the federations are okay with it, then they can play. I don't think they would be able to play the Olympics together, but I think all other badminton tournaments would be absolutely fine. It's definitely happened before. If we cast our mind back in the men's doubles just to 2017, you had Tan Boon Hong and Hendra Setiawan, Indonesia and Malaysia. I can remember in the 2009 All England watching Flande Limpele and I think Anastasia Ruski from Russia. They got to the semi-finals of the All England in the mixed doubles. That was quite an interesting partnership to watch. And then at the World Championships, we've seen 3 mixed nation pairings reach the final. 2 of those have won. So we had Chris Adcock and Imogen Bankia, that's England and Scotland, in 2011. Thomas Lund and Katrine Bengtsson, that's Denmark and Sweden, in 1993. And then in 1983, one of the first World Championships, it was won by Thomas Kihlström of Sweden and Nora Perry of England. So mixed nation partnerships is not something new. It's still rare, obviously, because most players play under a federation. I think if badminton becomes a sport where we see more and more independent players, we might see more and more mixed nation pairings emerging. Yeah, so it is unique. They had a tough draw. They had Zhang and Wei of China, the second seeds. For me, they didn't win. They got to the final, but for me, I see them as probably the best pair in the world right now. They were doing really well in the first game. They were in a position to win the opening game. But then I think what happened basically was I think the Chinese were just getting used to their playing style. Obviously, first round is always a little bit awkward for any pairs when they're getting used to not just the conditions, but then they got to play a new pair that no one's seen before. So they didn't know quite what to expect. But I think so once the Chinese kind of won the first game, they'd kind of figured out what was happening. And then the second game wasn't so close. But it's an interesting partnership. I think it's only going to be one that we'll see for a maximum of a year because Matthias is a suspension from competition is only for 1 year, and I do see those two coming back as they're a partnership off the court, not just on it. But I'm definitely going to keep an eye on them throughout this period, and it'd be really interesting to see what they can do. I definitely think we might see them getting quite far in some of these bigger tournaments. They've definitely got those capabilities. Other new pairings, we saw two, well, there's three, I guess. Say three, but they involve players from two pairings. You'll understand what I mean in a second. So the Thai mixed team have basically split their partnership. Dechapol and Sapisree are no longer together, and they've been put with Jomko and, I can't remember her name. What's her name? I've got it here. Jomko and Sapisree. Apologies, I forgot your name. So two former partnerships. Obviously, Dechapol and Sapisree are more well known. Obviously, they're former world champions. You know, been one of the best pairs in the world for the last 6-7 years. So they've split them and created two new partnerships. In this video, I want to focus more on Sapisree and Jomko because they're out of the two pairs the ones that give me a little bit more excitement. I think they can be very good. Obviously, we all know Sapisree is very skillful from the net, reads the game really well, is perfectly adaptable to all disciplines in badminton, but has really kind of come into her own in the mixed. And then Jomko behind her is equally, well, maybe not quite as laterally quick as Dechapol was, but I think he's got a little bit more skill. That's probably debatable, but what he does have is he has a lot of power from the back. Something that was definitely needed in these slower conditions. Yeah, you know, I really enjoyed watching those two play. They got to the quarterfinals here, and I think we're going to see much more of them. Like I said, Sapsiree's a fantastic player, plenty of experience. And Jomko, even before making this new partnership, was getting some really good results with his former partner Sapisree. He's got all the makings of a great mixed player. The skills, he's got the speed, and he's got a tremendous amount of power. So I think we're going to see a lot of them. As far as Dechapol is concerned, I want to focus more on his men's doubles. And that's not just because he reached the semi-finals coming through from the qualifying, but that he did it with his former junior partner, Thinaah Kedrin. As juniors, they were an incredibly successful pair. In fact, in 2014, they were the World Junior Champions. So, 10 years later in 2024, can that junior success translate into senior success? Well, they've had a great start, of course, reaching the semi-finals at the Arctic Open, but one thing that I do feel might hamper their potential to reach higher successes and be consistent is that I don't see this pair having enough firepower to really trouble the top pairs. Yep, they've got other qualities. They're incredibly fast around each other. Obviously, they've got a good understanding. It seemed that they haven't lost that since their junior days. I do know that they played some team events together, but that understanding they've got, obviously from knowing each other for so long, is clearly still there, and that can always, with a little bit more tournaments, with a few more matches under the belt, that's only going to get stronger. And I think that connection, that kind of communication and relationship they have together could actually help them be quite successful. But overall, the firepower, I feel that's always going to let them down, especially Kedrin. I mean, Dechapol obviously was world class. He's a world champion in mixed doubles, and you don't get there without being able to hit it relatively hard. But I felt that his qualities in the mixed doubles were more than just power. It was his ability to move so fast laterally around the mid-court and then also go from there to then coming forward very quickly. Of course, you can use those qualities in the men's doubles, but I do think that Dechapol is a stronger mixed player than men's doubles. I mean, that sounds like a bit of a non-statement, seeming as he's had the majority of his career as a mixed doubles player, but still, I feel in terms of future success for this pair, they can have it. I'm not saying they can't, but I feel like the firepower is going to kind of go against them, and that was kind of seen when they played against the Danish pair, who have a very strong defence, a little bit more organised because they're a bit more experienced together. They just were able to kind of expose the weaknesses of the Thai pair. But still, regardless of that, they were exciting to watch. It's great to see a new pair on the block. You know, it's good to see an old pair come back. You know, we're talking going back 10 years when they last played together. So, but what I will say, one thing that I find quite amusing about this is that usually players go from playing 2 disciplines to down to 1. You know, like Watanabe's done that recently. Jae has literally just done that after the Olympics. Yet Dechapol's gone from 1 discipline to 2. How long he'll keep playing both, I don't know, but that definitely tickled me. But you know, he's an incredibly fit athlete, so maybe he's got the capabilities to do it. So yeah, those are the 4, I guess, new pairings. All really interesting and all for different reasons. Out of them, I'm going to probably say that Jomko and Sapisree have the best chances of being successful at the highest of levels. The other pairs all have capabilities, but I think we're going to see, if I had to pick one out of those lot that I think we're going to see the most of, I think it's going to be Jomko and Sapisree. Okay, this might be an opinion that only I have. I'm not sure how many others, but I really, really do like Kunlavut versus Kodai Naraoka matches. Okay, I said it. I really do. Most people find that incredibly boring. They got booed in their World Championship final. They got booed in their match in China Open at the start. And I get it. Some of their rallies, especially when you see both of them just turning to their backhand incredibly easily, do get a little bit boring. But for some reason, there's something about them, those matches, that I do enjoy. I grew up watching a lot of badminton from the 1980s, where there was this real sheer kind of this physical beauty about the matches, especially when they were played in Asia. You know, no aircon, crowd is literally on the court, and it felt like a cauldron of like 2 gladiators going at each other, and I just really liked that. So when I'm seeing like Kunlavut versus Kodai, I feel like I'm watching like a physical battle, and it on top of that, both players are incredibly skillful. And I think that kind of gets lost by people because they're just not seeing like the attacking shots. They're not seeing winners. They're seeing lots of long clears, clearing rallies and all that kind of stuff. But for me, I do enjoy it. You know, they had a 1 hour and 11-minute match in Finland, and that was for a score of 21-16, 21-11 to Kunlavut, so it wasn't even close. So you can imagine, had that match gone to 3 and had been an epic, a bit like their world final, that could have easily gone on for another hour on top, if not longer. And I would have happily sat through and watched all of it. Yeah, I just wanted to take this time to tell everyone that I do actually quite enjoy their matches. And another reason why I wanted to bring it up was that actually it leads into giving, if you aren't aware, obviously Kunlavut won that match, and then he was supposed to play Jonathan Christie in the semi-finals, which another match I was really looking forward to. I was the most excited by that match on semi-final Saturday, but it didn't happen because Kunlavut withdrew, and the reason for it was that he picked up a foot injury in that quarter-final against Kodai. Nothing too serious. He's still playing Denmark this week, but it was bad enough that the coaches and Kunlavut himself didn't want to risk any further issues, so they decided to withdraw. So they were playing the sensible game. But yeah, just wanted to say I like Kodai versus Kunlavut matches. Do you agree or not? Let me know. Right, okay, so in every episode of Beckman's Breakdown, one section that always comes up is obviously talking about the finals, the champions and the finalists, and this episode's going to be no different, and like I've done in the previous episodes, I'm going to go through them in the order that they were played on Sunday. The first final was the mixed doubles. Absolutely no surprise that it was China. China, clearly the leading nation in the mix. They've got the Olympic champions. They haven't got the world champions actually, but you know, they got the Olympic champions They're not playing at the moment. Who knows when they're going to return? Well, maybe they're returning soon. I just can't quite remember off the top of my head. But it seems that China don't need them because they've got 2 pairs already in the position to fill world number 1 and world number 2 spots. Feng Yanzhe and Wang Dongping came out on top this time. It wasn't a match that excited me. It did go to 3 games. It just felt a little bit going through the motions, I guess. Feng Yanzhe and Wang Dongping were just that little bit sharper. They made less errors. Feng Yanzhe, like he did when they won the China Open, was incredibly dominant from the mid-court, really stepping up as much as he can, making his presence known. The guy is tall, and he used all of that. Maybe that's something that he's really trying to get into his game more, because I felt he did that really well at the China Open. He's done it again this week. If he has, then that's fantastic, because if he's dominating in the mid-court, it's very hard to get it over him. And then Wang Dongping is obviously very proficient at clearing up any small gaps in the mid-court to front-court area. Is there anything else that I wanted to say about that? No, not really. Women's singles final next, and it was a bit of a disappointing one, because I thought we might get a really good battle, because in the semi-finals, Ratchnok Intanon played sublimely well against Tomoka Miyazaki. Her sharpness and speed around the court was second to none. She was hitting lines. Her cross-court smashes from both sides were super good. And then Han Yue was just incredibly solid. So yeah, with Han Yue playing kind of her nice solid game, and then Ratchnok playing the way she was, I thought it led to quite a nice contrast for the final, and I thought we could see something quite spectacular, but we didn't. Han Yue came out incredibly strong, made far less errors, and Ratchnok just seemed to be forcing it. Maybe fatigue as well. She'd had a very hard week. From round 1, she had tough matches. She had a really hard win over Wang Ziyi in the first round, and a really hard quarterfinal against her compatriot Katathong in the quarters. So maybe she just ran out of legs in the end. But one factor I do think played a key role was, if you look at the difference between the semi-final and the final in terms of her opponent, I felt that although Ratchnok was finishing the rallies incredibly well against Miyazaki, she was helped by the fact that Miyazaki's shot quality and shot choice wasn't quite as good. There were a lot of shots to the back that were just a little bit slow and a little bit short. If you watch it back, Ratchnok was hitting a lot of her winners. Her back foot is on the doubles line. Whereas in the final, Han Yue was able to get it nearer the back. She was able to, as a result, she was able to defend those shots better. It probably put more pressure on Ratchnok to go a bit tighter, and that led to a few more mistakes. Yeah, so I felt like Han Yue's shot quality, she didn't really have to do, well, she did have to do a lot, but she didn't have to necessarily win her points. She was just neutralising a lot, so anytime Ratchnok tried to punch clear her, she would just lace it down. Her lifting and her clearing had good speed and good depth and good width, and I think that just compiled pressure on Ratchnok point after point after point, and I think that's what led to Ratchnok making a lot of mistakes. And even in the second game, it was close to the halfway point, but Han Yue didn't falter, and then Ratchnok hit that wall and the final went away. So huge congratulations to Han Yue. She played the final perfectly. If anyone's thinking, oh, how did Ratchnok play so well on semis and then didn't play so well in the final, what you need to realise is that she probably wasn't playing quite as well, but a lot of it was down to the shot quality of her opponent. Han Yue's was far more consistently really good, whereas Miyazaki's was lacking that little bit of speed and was a little bit short at times. Okay, so men's doubles final was definitely one of the finals I was very looking forward to. The men's doubles matches, like I said at the start of this video, the conditions were on the slow side, but they were just about right where you kind of get these really long, entertaining rallies where there's a lot of attack versus defense. It didn't divulge too much into just clearing. And also with the pairs like that were in the final, the Danes, very strong in defense, but have definitely improved their attacking. And then you got Go Sufei and Nurzudin, who are, I think, quite known for having big smashes, big attacks, especially. No, I thought, okay, we're going to see some really entertaining stuff here. Also, I felt that they were about 50-50 in terms of who could win. Malaysians definitely had the better recent form. They won the China Open at the last tournament, and they've also done really well at the other events so far, whereas the Danes haven't done so well, also haven't played so much. mainly because Kim Astrup got married. But what they had on their hands was not only were they defending champions, they knew what it took to win the Arctic Open. They clearly liked the conditions there. But they had a 6-1 head-to-head against the Malaysians, and the last 2 matches at least had gone in straight games. So I think the Danes probably had a fair bit of confidence going in that they would be able to repeat that. But I felt that it was probably not going to be a straight game match. I think the ends were going to become decisive, which they were. And also just the fact that Go and Noah are a far better pair than when they played the Danes before. The match was very evenly, there was a few swings of momentum, but very evenly played all the way through. Danes had the advantage right at the crux. The Malaysians did have the better end at the end in the final half, but the Danes had a little bit of a lead, and it seemed that they were able to keep it. It felt that the Malaysians couldn't quite close it. There was definitely some tetchy moments, but then I think when the Danes got to 18-19, they just weren't able to progress it. The Malaysians just found another gear, maybe confidence from having played so well in previous matches, in previous tournaments, that came to the forefront. And the Danes, they just weren't able to capitalise, and the Malaysians were able to come out as deserved winners. Really entertaining match, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. Huge congratulations to Go and Noah, another tournament win for you. And actually now they've won a World Tour tournament at every single level, so 300, 500, 750 and 1000. Not many pairs can lay claim to that. It'd be interesting to see if they can consistently keep this going, but they're an exciting pair to watch for sure. Yeah, really, really exciting to see their future. And while I'm on the subject of future, a quick tangent, a quick side note, because it does involve Malaysia and the future, and that is the World Junior Championships, which were played at the same time as this Arctic Open. Malaysia won the boys' doubles. Aaron Tai and Kang Kai-shing won the boys' doubles, beating a Chinese pair in the final in China, so that's incredibly impressive. What also makes it even more reason to celebrate for Malaysia isn't just that they had one of their top pairs win a tournament on the senior level and the junior pair win the World Juniors, so the future is looking bright. But also it means that Malaysia have now become the most successful nation in the boys' doubles of the World Juniors, where they've won 8 World Junior titles in that discipline. Second is China on 7. So going into that final, it was 7-all for China and Malaysia, and it was a China-Malaysia final, so I think that was quite apt. And also just what really makes it more is that in every other discipline, including the team events and overall medals, China are way ahead of everyone else. So the fact that Malaysia are actually ahead of China in that, I think is a pretty cool fact, and all the more reason for Malaysia to celebrate this week. Go and Noah winning the Arctic Open and winning now a tournament every single level of the World Tour, and Aaron and Kang winning the World Junior title, giving Malaysia the most amount of titles in that discipline. And there was almost 3 things for Malaysia to celebrate, but Pearly and Thinaah Muralitharan, although they did fantastic to reach the final, 3 finals out of 4 tournaments played, they came up short against Liu Shengshu and Tan Ning of China. The decisive factor for me, you can boil it down to kind of 2 things. The first one is that I think with the conditions that they were inside the arena, it favoured that overall a little bit more physicality that the Chinese pair can bring. And I think other than that, it was also that the Malaysians were probably a little tired. Understandable when the day before against Ri Iwanaga and Ki Nakanishi of Japan, they had a 110-minute epic. And when I say epic, I'm not just kind of like, that's not hyperbole. It really was an epic. For me, it was the match of the tournament. One of the best women's doubles matches I've seen in a long time. And the reason I say that is not just because it was super close, not that it went on for 110 minutes, not that it was just fantastic badminton, but for me, what made it really, really entertaining was that the intensity was always pretty much on max, which is quite surprising. In women's doubles and a match going on that long, actually it doesn't have to be women's doubles, just a match that long, you're going to get periods where there's lulls. But in this one, there wasn't really many. The rallies, when I watched it from start to finish, the rallies were just intense the whole time. If you combine that with the fact that there was some really interesting net battles going on, which for me I found it also surprising, because in a hall like that, I know I keep saying the conditions, but in a hall that does play a little slower, if you're second best, it's just easy to go, right, I'll restart the rally, I'll send it to the back. But here, all 4 players, if I had to pick one who did it the most, it was probably Thinaah. but they were actually really fighting for the control of the net because both pairs were looking to attack as much as possible. And that leads into the other thing that I found really exciting, was that all 4 players played with great variety, not just in terms of they were playing the drop shots, smashes and slices, but the different angles outwards as well. A lot of the time they were trying to go for the space that's usually deemed as slightly high risk, but they were coming off and they were going for it, and that just added to the entertainment value for me. So yeah, incredibly close match. All 4 players played brilliantly. The intensity never really wavered, and the way in which they approached the game, all 4 players, was just, it made for a very entertaining match. For me, it was the match of the tournament by quite some distance, and one of the best matches, not just women's doubles matches, but matches I've seen in a long time. But obviously, I've got to talk about the finalists. I must say congratulations to the Chinese Lu Shengshu and Tan Ning. They're also on a good run. Both pairs are a hot form, but I think the deciding factor in this one was that the Chinese probably just did have a little bit more energy. It was noticeable at the end of each game that the Chinese were able to run away with it, but I think they also just, in the conditions, are just a little bit stronger, a little bit more physical. And then the last final, the men's singles, again, this was another final, just like the men's doubles, I was really looking forward to, and I felt also it was quite difficult to call who was going to win. They always, Cho Chen Chen and Jonathan Christie do always seem to produce some good matches. Obviously, a lot of people felt that the advantage was with Christie because he didn't have to play a semi-final, and I think by the time they stepped on court, Cho had been on court 2.5 hours longer, which that's a lot in badminton terms. In men's singles, that's like running several marathons more. That's quite considerable. However, I do think, I must say that Christie not playing a semi-final is not as much, or wasn't as much of an advantage as maybe some people thought it was. And the reason I say that is because if you have a day off, yes, you're more well rested, but you could lose a little bit of sharpness because you haven't played a competitive match that has all those emotions running through it. So although to most of you might think, it's just a day off, he's fully rested, yes, that is the case, but you can lose that little bit of sharpness that maybe Cho was able to maintain because he could play day after day. And also, if you consider that Christie's quarterfinal against Lu Chek-yu was pretty one-sided, it wasn't much of a challenge, that maybe come the finals day, he wasn't quite as sharp as he could have been. But to be honest, in this match, physicality didn't really become a factor. Not as much as I thought it would be. Cho Chen Chen, as we all know, is a physical specimen. Jill Clark does like to mention that every single time he plays, and I agree he is, especially for someone who's 34, almost 35 years old now. It's incredibly impressive. And Christie is also a physical player, which is why I was a little surprised that Christie didn't make it more of a physical battle. It wasn't that he was playing slowly or passively, but what I felt was when he was attacking, trying to be a little bit more on the attack in the rallies, he played with tremendous speed. He really did inject it a lot, and that was really good to see. However, when he was trying to do one of those kind of like rallying rallies, not passive's the wrong word, but like more trying to extend the rallies, make it more physical, I felt that he just played those ones a little too slow. Had he been able to play it a little bit faster and kept the intensity a little up, maybe he could have really kind of made more of that advantage of being a little bit fresher. Because, yeah, there were some long rallies, but whenever they were, I didn't feel like they were fast enough to really hurt someone like Cho Chen Chen. But he wasn't able to do that, and combine it with the fact that Cho Chen Chen, this whole tournament, for me, definitely played with a little bit more proactivity than what we usually see from him. He's usually quite passive, just playing the shuttle around, almost like he's just enjoying running around the court and playing it. He was definitely playing with a little bit more oomph in his game, a little bit more intensity, especially when he was coming forward off his attacking shots. I thought his play from the front of the court was a much more proactive and taking the shuttle away than I usually see from him. However, I can't talk about this final without obviously talking about what happened at the end. A little bit of, at the time, controversy, but I think since then that's kind of like been settled. But what happened at 18-17 was that Cho Chen Chen played a net shot. Christie went to kill it, but didn't actually hit it because I think he realised it wasn't going over. Then it was called a fault by the umpire. Christie was obviously, like pretty much all players, whenever they get called a fault, whether they're right or wrong, reacted like, what? That wasn't a fault, that wasn't a fault. Cho looked quite confused by it as well. There was obviously a little bit of contesting from Christie, but obviously the umpire's not going to overrule his decision. And then the next 2 points were, I think, a return the net and a short lift that Cho finished. So yeah, it was a sour ending to finals day, a sour ending to the men's singles final. And I kind of feel sorry for both players, because obviously the decision affected Christie quite a lot, to the point that I think his mind was still on that point even long after the match was finished. And Cho couldn't celebrate his win. He, sportsmanship on his behalf, that was lovely to see, but it's also quite sad because it was a massive win for him and he wasn't able to truly celebrate it. I think even Victoria, who we all know loves to celebrate Cho Chen Chen's victories, even she celebrates points from love all, so she didn't even celebrate. So it just kind of had this kind of like really downbeaten, downhearted, sour finish to the tournament. Obviously, initial reactions to all of this were that it was a bad call by the umpire. I think on reflection, it's kind of been proved that it was a good decision. I think Christie's racket was just over the net. But regardless, I feel like this whole situation could be alleviated, as most people point out, by having a VAR system. And that was the question I posed at the beginning of this video, and I think it's perfect timing to answer that question now. Okay, so does badminton need VAR? It's the question I asked at the start. It's a question I said I'd answer, so I'm going to answer it. My simple response is yes, we do need VAR in badminton. However, having said that, obviously it's not just as simple as we should just put it in and give them an extra challenge and players can do as they wish. Obviously it's going to take a lot of thought to kind of figure out how's this going to work, how many challenges, is there any potential implications that could happen from allowing this kind of thing to happen. But for me, I think with situations like this time it proved, I believe it proved that the umpire was correct. But just that uncertainty from Jonathan Christie and Cho, it affected the match too much. Had that situation been where it had gone to a VAR and it had been proven that the umpire was right, I think Christie would have been okay. Like, it still might have affected him, but it would have affected him less. He might have actually been able to, okay, it was right, I'll switch on. And vice versa, had it been proven to be an incorrect call, obviously then it would have been 18 all and the match would have kind of continued, and who knows what would have happened afterwards. So I think just purely from the fact that it can alleviate situations like that, it would also alleviate any of all the fans afterwards with the outrage online, or people going, oh, umpires can't do this, can't do that, or why don't we have it? It would just kind of put like any doubt to rest when it comes to those kind of situations. So I do think that VAR being brought in will be a good thing for that. In terms of application, I think we could probably apply a VAR system for the net court areas incredibly easily. There's already a net set up. I don't think it would take too long for it to go up to someone, a third umpire, third judge, to kind of make that quick decision. So in terms of like, would it waste more time? Yeah, it would add more time, but I think the pros would outweigh the cons. In terms of a VAR system for other stuff, like does it hit someone's shirt on the way through, or was it a double hit? That would require a little bit more thought, obviously, because you need to think about camera angles, etc., and how can you work it out. Whereas the net one, I think, is quite straightforward. Did they hit the net? Did they hit it over the net, or whatever? I think that they can be decided pretty quickly. So yes, my answer is yes, we do need VAR. How far we take that within badminton, not quite sure. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, but I think definitely for the situations around the net, 100% I think it should be something the BWF are talking about and should at least give it a try. I do want to finish, before I end this section, is that this time the umpire was proved to be, I believe, I keep saying that, but I'm pretty sure, I've had people message me and I'm pretty sure it does seem like actually it was a good call, correct call. We do know we see some bad calls as well from umpires, but they have to see it, they have to make that decision in a split second. It's incredibly difficult. You got to think they're also looking out for loads of other things that could happen. So I don't think we should necessarily blame the umpires. Of course, if they make an absolute shocker, yeah, they need to put their hand up and take blame for that. But a lot of times these kind of net faults at full speed, it's difficult. Even with the replays, the slow motion replays, looking at frame by frame, sometimes it's still difficult to call. So I don't think we should put too much blame on the umpires. And I think that's also another reason why VAR could be quite useful, because it would just kind of either back up what they say. It'll just be something that's quite easy. You know, like we know linesmen can make bad calls because the shuttle's coming at weird angles. Sometimes did the cork just clip the line? It happens very quickly. Sometimes the shuttle's spinning to the ground. So Hawkeye obviously helps them just make sure that the line calls are correct. I think the same could be said for the net situations. Okay guys, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. I think I've spoken for long enough. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Beckman's Breakdown. Slightly different in the fact that usually when I do these, I kind of have a pretty good script. I do obviously go off script occasionally, but I kind of stick to it, so it becomes a little bit more like, scripted. Whereas this time I kind of like made some notes and just kind of went off the cuff, so there's more ums, ahs, all this kind of stuff. But I feel like it should make it seem a little bit more natural. Curious to know what you think. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I know you can't please everyone on the internet, but I am still quite curious to see what you think. It will keep getting better. The more I do it in this style, the better I'll get, the more concise I'll get with my points, and I won't just waffle on and on, which I sometimes have a tendency to do. Next week is going to be a little bit different for me. It's the Denmark Open. There's plenty to look forward to. You've got the return of Ahn Se-young, you've got the debut of Watanabe and also named Maya Taguchi, and a few other things that are going on. However, I'm going to be away. I'm going on a little holiday, so I'm not sure how much I'll be able to watch. So it might be slightly different. I might not be able to talk about as many things, but things that catch my eye, I'll still make an episode. It might come a little later next week, but I'm not quite sure what the topics will be. But I'll still try and watch as much as I can because I love watching badminton. But just so you know, it might not be quite as in-depth as usual. Other news, I am in process. This is I guess an exclusive for you guys that have actually watched this far in the video, is that I have started on my next main video, and I'm going to tell you all now what it's about. It's going to be about the Indonesian mixed doubles legend Liliana Natsir. I'm very interested to do this. I've always admired watching her. I've watched her play a number of times live and always been in awe. She was obviously able to achieve great things with 2 different partners. She has a great story to tell, and I can't wait to... I've already started looking into it, and it's even more amazing than I thought it would be. I'm not sure how long it's going to take me to make that video. Hopefully just a few weeks, but it could take longer because obviously her career expanded on time. She did so many things, so I'm not quite sure. If you have watched this far and you did just hear that exclusive, then in the comments tell me your favourite moment from Natsir's career or best result or whatever you think stands out about her. I think if anyone reads those comments and hasn't watched this far, they're going to be confused. So I think it would be quite a good way for you to tell me that you've been this far, and also just so I can hear some of your thoughts on that. Anyway, I've spoken for long enough. I need to get going. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm looking forward to making many more of these in the future. Till next time, everyone. See you later.